Hey guys, what is up? It is the Fast Break Report here, bringing you guys another vlog. Real quick before I get into the video, I just want to say I do not feel good today, okay? I am like really dreading making this video right now, but you know, the show must go on. I did want to put out a video today, but I'm just like, I feel like crap. Like I would rather be just laying down and watching football, but I don't know, the Eagles are blowing out the Giants, so it is what it is. But NBA trade deadline rapidly approaching, and I want to talk about a trade that a couple people have talked about, but I'm going to give my input on it, and that's a trade for Trey Young. So a lot of people have been speculating because of the stuff that happened in the beginning of the year with Nate McMillan, that because Trey Young doesn't get along with Nate McMillan and that the players on the staff don't really like Trey Young, it seems, or the players on the team feel like Trey Young like abuses his power and stuff like that, that there might be a trade. And there's only two teams that I really think could make it happen, but even those two teams, it's like there's only like out of these two teams it makes the most sense for them. But you know, you really got to ask, like, is it going to help them? One team I think it could, but it would have to be like I don't even know how really they would, like, they'd be strapped forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, they would not be able to sign a free agent for God knows how fucking long. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So I want to get into my gripes with Trey Young before I get into, like, do I think he will be traded or not? And if he is traded, this will be what happens. So the first thing I want to say here is I don't think Trey Young is going to justify the haul people think it will. He's one of those players that I just think, well, it reminds me of Allen Iverson, okay? A guy who can score the ball very well, but sucks at defense. He's not a good off-ball player. You know, when they added DeJounte Murray to this roster, I thought for sure Trey Young was going to be doing Steph Curry shit, and he's not. And unfortunately, I feel like that's the only path to greatness for Trey Young is Stephen Curry. You know, if he becomes the next fucking Stephen Curry. And that's not an easy thing to do. Okay, Steph Curry is in a league of his own. He's a generational talent. Arguably the greatest shooter to ever play the fucking game. I just think if that's the bar that has to be set for Trey Young to lead a team to the playoffs and lead them to like an Eastern Conference Finals or a Western Conference Finals, then you're asking a lot. And he's a guy that I feel like hasn't worked on his game much. He's one of the worst defenders in the league, arguably the worst. I don't think he's worked on his game enough for teams to really want to justify trading for him. And on top of it, you have Atlanta, who just paid him an ass ton of money, where a team would have to come up with $37 million worth of salary cap room or salary cap to even trade for him, okay? So that's the first thing. Now, the other thing here is I think that Atlanta is way more likely, because of signing Trey Young to such a big deal, they're way more likely to fire Nate McMillan and bring in another head coach before they trade Trey Young. That's the first thing that I think happens here, is they try another head coach before they ever explore trading him, which is why I don't think a trade will happen. But in the event a trade does happen, there's only two teams that I think could come up with the salary cap room to get him, and teams that it makes sense for. And those two teams are the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Toronto Raptors. And the only reason that they are in this conversation is because they have 2 point guards that are on expiring deals in D'Angelo Russell and Fred VanVleet. Now, we'll talk about Toronto first. Toronto has Fred VanVleet, and they've already put out their asking price for OG Anunoby. It seems almost like they're tanking, but the problem is here, it's like there's no guarantee that they get Victor Wembanyama, even if they do take the NBA tanking route, right? Like, they're 20-26 this year. They still have Siakam, which could be a nice piece next to Trey Young. It could be kind of like, you know, what they hoped John Collins would be. But You get to put him next to Pascal Siakam, and on top of it, like, he has such a big contract that at least you're locked into Trey Young for another 4 or 5 years. And being that Toronto's not a huge free agent destination, Nick Nurse is a defensive coach, I honestly feel like Toronto is like the most ideal situation for Trey Young. And that's if they decide, hey, we're trading Fred VanVleet, and then you send Fred VanVleet and maybe OG Anunoby or Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. plus some picks to Atlanta for Trae Young. That's the first scenario, okay? I don't think Atlanta's going to get OG Anunoby out of it as well. I just don't. I feel like if they do trade for Trae Young, it's going to be Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. plus picks. I just don't think they're going to get OG Anunoby and Fred VanVleet out of them. So that's the first thing. The next thing, hold on. I feel like I got to sneeze, but it's going away. The next team is the Minnesota Timberwolves. And the reason I say that is because D'Angelo Russell's on an expiring deal worth $31 million. And yeah, you know what? You would be strapped for cash forever. With Trae Young on your roster, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert, and you'd be paying an ass ton of money in luxury tax cap penalties, okay? So, like, adding Trae Young to the Timberwolves would have to make you a finals contender. And I don't know if it does that. Like, you know, like, yeah, they would fix their three-point problem most likely, but Trae Young, like I said, not a great off-ball player, not a great defender, shooting horrible efficiency-wise this year, but you give Minnesota the playmaking point guard they're looking for, in a guy who can dish the rock, a guy who can shoot. You know, you put him next to Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert. Now, I don't know how the fit would work with Rudy Gobert. I just don't. But if Atlanta has buyer's remorse and they're looking to get off that contract, which I think is a bad contract for him anyway, like, I get why Atlanta paid Trae Young what they did. You know, you traded Luka Doncic for him, so you kind of got to make it look like you kind of care about him to your fan base, but I can't help but feel like maybe the Atlanta Hawks front office is having buyer's remorse. And the other thing is there's no guarantee that D'Angelo Russell would re-sign. Really, the only reason I could see Atlanta doing this is because they're going to go in full tank mode. They don't care that D'Angelo Russell stays there the rest of the year or even resigns there, and they're going for the Wemby sweepstakes, okay? And really, the main reason they would do this is just to get off Trae Young's contract. That's the other reason that I feel like Atlanta would do this, is just to get off the contract, because he's making $37 million this year, $40 the year after that, I think $43 after that, $45, and then $47. So, yeah, Trae Young's getting paid a whole lot of bread to be, you know, a three-point shooting, passing type of guy. So, like I said, I understand why they did this, but, you know, like, it's kind of biting them in the ass now. The only other team I could think that would maybe get in the mix on this is the Wizards, and that's maybe just to put asses in their seats. You know, they have Bradley Beal already. They have Kristaps Porzingis. Maybe you add Trae Young to that if they don't, you know, maybe you have Kyle Kuzma if you don't trade him. But if you're the Wizards, maybe you try to add Trae Young to what you have in Washington. You probably have to trade Kyle Kuzma or Kristaps Porzingis, but you get to add him to that and, you know, maybe reminisce on the early 2000s Wizards when you had Gilbert Arenas, Caron Butler, and Antoine Jameson. So, I don't know, man. Like, there's only one or two ways that Trae Young, I think gets traded at the deadline, and that's if Fred VanVleet and D'Angelo Russell don't sign extensions or have no intentions to, or a team is incredibly desperate, hear that he's available, and want to maybe excite their fan base a little bit, and you know, maybe an out-of-market team, small market team to mid-market team decides, like, hey, we could get like a potential superstar guy here for trading an expiring player. And, you know, if you're a team like Toronto, it makes sense, you know, because, yeah, Trae Young's not the greatest defensive player in the world, not the greatest off-ball player, but you're not exactly a free agent destination, you know, and then you can put him next to Scotty Barnes and Siakam, and maybe things get better, but they're a team that is not a hot free agent destination, so getting Trae Young is a win for them, you know, so, oh, man. So, anyway, that's going to be it for me, guys. Tell me what you guys think about this down below in the comment section below. Like helps me out. Subscribe if you guys want to see more on the Fast Break Report. And I'm out of this motherfucker. Peace, guys.